Welcome to the It's Your City, the Planning and Future, Caring for the Present. This is the webinar series from Hartford Next. This is the fourth in the series. Today, we are featuring the City of Hartford Department of Development Services. We also have simultaneous translations for this webinar. We have Alba and Miguel from Interpreter and Translations of Glastonbury, Connecticut. And if you would like to hear this in Spanish, you can go to the lower right-hand side. There is a world that's symbol that says interpretation, and you may click on that, and you may then hear this in Spanish simultaneously. So Alba, would you like to share? So if we have clicked on that, then you will hear everything in Spanish. You will hear mostly Spanish, but you will hear a little bit of English in the background. It'll be a little bit softer. Today, our co-host is Mary Falvey. May we have the next screen, please? And Mary Falvey is my name is Marion Griffin. I am the board chair, and Mary Falvey is our communications and marketing chair. And she will be assisting today as we go back and forth and talk to our panelists and hear more about planning and zoning. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mary to give us welcome.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I've got like 5 screens going at once here. Welcome all. We just want to go over some of the ground rules and how this is presented. So as you might have heard at the beginning, this webinar is being recorded. And we will be partnering with Hartford Access Television to get these recordings up on a public platform so they can be viewed again. You will not be recorded. We will not see you as attendees. We ask you to please use the chat if you have information to share with one another, maybe a helpful website link or something like that. However, if you have questions for the panelists, and we encourage you to please talk to the panelists, please use the Q&A feature that you'll find at the bottom of your screen. And I will be monitoring that throughout the webinar, and we'll relay those questions to our host and our panelists. We will have the slides available for you as well to view on our website in the next day or two. And towards the end of the webinar, we will be putting up a link for you to take a really brief, I mean like less than 30-second survey for how we did and your ideas on maybe some future sessions that you would like to see us doing. That link will also be sent to you in an email in a couple of days. But thank you again for being with us, and back to you, Marion.
Thank you, Mary. So today, what I'd like to do is talk to you a little bit about Hartford Next. And can we have the next slide, please? So first of all, our agenda is that we're going to talk a little bit about who we are, who Hartford Next is, and then talk about a little bit what our topic is today relative to our city government. We will have the panel introduced by our moderator, who is Aaron Gill. And also you will find resources in the chat. And at the end of the session, we'd like for you to complete the survey, and perhaps you can even do it before you leave today. It's short, to the point, and hope to see you again at our next session. But let's get started today. So first of all, who are we? Well, Hartford Next is the coalition of the NRZs, and there are 13 in the city of Hartford. And we also have on our board a representative, 2 actually, from the city of Hartford. Randall Davis happens to be one of those. And we also have at-large representatives. So Mary Falvey represents Hartford Preservation Alliance. We also have the Hartford Public Library, and there are some others organizations that are also part of our coalition. So what is our mission? It's to be the collective voice of Hartford residents and stakeholders, and we want to work to strengthen and grow our community. So we want to create the environment where we can have discussions and hear from others and keep it so that anyone who is interested can become engaged. So we want to facilitate inclusion and innovation to make our communities the best that they can be. So next, please. The Neighborhood Training Institute. It's been around since the early 2000s, and some of the items that have been done, especially forums, if you remember the Yard Goats Stadium, there were forums held on that. And most currently, we've done some webinars, one on building back better, bringing our community after COVID. We also are doing asset mapping within the community, and we'll have some programs on that. We do civic engagement and education to encourage our residents to be involved. And that's one of the reasons why we're holding today's session. We do want individuals and residents to participate in the government. We do have, and there are ways they can do that. And hopefully today you will learn more about how participants can become engaged. We know there are boards and commissions, but there are other ways as well that we should be all participating and making our community better. Next slide, please. So today's webinar, Planning for the Future, Caring for the Present, features our Department of Development Services. Again, it's the fourth in the series, and our whole point for this is to help everyone know how the government works, how it impacts our lives and those who live, work, and recreate in Hartford, and how to become more involved. So with Department of Development Services, we will only do a portion of that today, and you'll find out what that is, but basically it's planning and zoning, housing, and blight remediation and housing code enforcement. So with that, I'd like to introduce our moderator, and our moderator is Erin Gill. And Erin is the former Frog Hollow NRZ chair. And as a member of the Frog Hollow NRZ, I have to tell you, we are saddened that he is no longer going to chair the committee, although he will be part of Frog Hollow still. He lives in Frog Hollow with his wife and 2 young sons. Erin is also vice chair of the City of Hartford's Planning and Zoning Commission. And as everyone remembers, the I-84 planning committees came around to the NRZs to discuss all the plans that and get our input into the plans. And Erin was a member of that as well. He is a professional engineer with a degree from the University of Michigan. And he has formed Wolverine Properties and is currently developing and renovating properties within the city of Hartford. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to Erin, who will begin our panel discussion. Thank you, Erin.
Hello there, and thank you, Marion. Thank you for having us. Thank you to Hartford Next for continuing these wonderful series. This information is not only helpful, but just invaluable, I think, for those of us that live here in the city, as we continue to make efforts to engage more of our neighbors and improve our wonderful city here, the city of Hartford. Joining me today will be Randall Davis, who is the Deputy Director of Development Services, Amy Chambers McKay, who is the Director of Planning, Brian Matthews, the Director of Housing, and Judith Rothschild, the Director of Blight Remediation and Housing Code Enforcement. And we'll jump right in. We're going to start with Mr. Davis. Randall, how are you today?
I am very well, thank you. Good morning, Erin. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for being here. For those who don't know Randall Davis brings 10 years of experience in strategic planning, communications, and policy analysis and development within the public sector, along with 20 years of experience in law, higher education, and private sector to his role. Formerly at CTDOT, Davis was a key figure in the team responsible for launching Connecticut's first bus rapid transit system, i.e. the CT Fast Track. He was also one of the lead corporate government and community liaisons at the DOT. Randall has worked closely with the I-84 Viaduct project team in transit strategic development, program and resource planning, and public communications and community engagement. Randall was born in Hartford and raised in Bloomfield, Hartford, and Windsor. He has lived in San Francisco, New York City, where he worked for major national and multinational corporations, as well as an institution of higher education in the areas of marketing administration and compliance. Randall studied liberal arts at New School University, New York, and received his Juris Doctorate in law from Rutgers. There he focused on administrative law, public governance, and state and federal regulatory oversight and compliance. Randall's licensed to practice law here in Connecticut and New York. And you can tell by the length of these bios today that we have very accomplished folks, not only joining us, but working for us, I'll say, here in the city of Hartford. Randall, you and I had a chance to first get to know each other back when you were still working for the DOT. I, along with others, were excited to hear that you were coming to join the city of Hartford and continue the progress that we're making here. This new role, I'll say it's not new anymore. You've been here for a couple of years, at least a couple of years, right? How long has it been now?
It's just short of 2 years. It'll be 2 years in January.
Okay. So help us understand for us, what is your role and tell us about your department.
Well, first of all, let me say that the Department of Development Services is delighted to be here. Charles, who's the director of our department, was unable to be here today and sends his regards. But one of the things that is important to him, as well as the department, is our commitment to the residents of the city of Hartford to making Hartford a better place. But to your point, in terms of what our department is, I'll just give you a quick high-level overview. So the Department of Development Services is one of the 15 functional units for the city of Hartford. An example of another functional unit is the fire department or the police department or the Department of Public Works. Within the Department of Development Services, we have 6 divisions, of which you're going to be hearing from 3 of our directors today who are subject matter experts in their area. But I can tell you, as you've already mentioned, they're all very accomplished and have skill sets that go beyond even just what they do where they are experts. In addition to our planning and zoning, our housing team that does inspections and blight, and our housing division, which is a different division, we also have the divisions of licensing and inspections, as well as small business and special events, and economic development that you'll hear from on a different panel. Overall, some of the things that we do in this department are we review construction plans, we issue permits, we perform inspections, we respond to citizen complaints with regard to housing in particular, and we work with the public and residents to try to resolve those issues. We also manage the disposition of city-owned property. So the Department of Development Services does a wide variety of things that intersects with many of our other functional units. And I can tell you that we work very closely with fire department or the Department of Public Works, as well as our department that oversees operations for the city and the mayor's office.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. That's part of the reason why we're doing 3 today and 3 at another time, because it's a lot of information and we do touch on a lot of things in this department.
So that being said, how do you prioritize, how do you find the balance between focusing on properties, and we'll talk about that some more as well as we go, but focusing on development of properties, focusing on the development of business, job creation. How do you balance all of this that's on the plate?
So let me start by saying it's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge. First and foremost, one of the things that we focus on is how will our actions benefit the city of Hartford? And obviously any city is only its residents, right? So that's where it starts. The city is the people who live here. So that's part of our fundamental tract. At the same token, what does that mean? Our residents need, as a city, we need to make sure that we have income so that we can provide service to residents. And our income comes from a variety of places, whether it's taxes on businesses or property taxes. So to answer your question, it really depends on the specific project. We look at each project and say, what are the benefits to the city of this project? Is it increased housing? Is it increased jobs? Is it increased access, whether it's public transit or something like that? So at the core of everything, there's reference to how will it benefit the city. That's how we do the balance, but it's definitely a challenging job.
And when we talk about development specifically, I think one of the things that we often hear in the city is this idea of downtown development, the urban core, the center of the city versus neighborhood development. Marion showed pretty early on the slide of all the different NRCs and the different neighborhoods that they represent. We obviously have a very strong neighborhood connection, or we have very strong neighborhoods here in the city. I think there are times where folks wonder, how do we find that balance between focusing on the neighborhoods and focusing on downtown, and does one have to suffer if the other one isn't? So how do you specifically, but how does your department find that balance between downtown development versus neighborhood development?
So you're right. It is a lot of work to figure out how to prioritize. But as I started at the top of this by saying that the city is its residents, the mayor, Charles, and this department is committed to ensuring that our neighborhoods are developed. And we all know that there's been many, many years of disinvestment in parts of our city. And there's been a commitment, at least since I've been here and have been working with this team. The mayor says this every day to us, as well as Charles, in terms of focusing on how we can work in our neighborhoods to develop them. I will say that when you're looking at development, there are different factors, right? So a city such as Hartford is important to its general region, but that also means that its business core is important to its general region. So we have to look at both of those things, and we have to do them simultaneously. It can't be just one or the other. And I believe that's what we're trying to do now. At the same token, when you're looking at development, we may have development deals that come into us that are city downtown specific, whether it's a large employer who wants to expand. As you saw, we just had an employer who took a couple of floors in the building next to us recently, in the same building that Infosys did. That's a slightly different project and development focus than in the neighborhoods, because we don't necessarily have that type of office space in the neighborhoods. That's not where they're going. So it is kind of a challenge because we're trying to walk and chew gum at the same time, at the same focus, at the same time, particularly with the Arpa dollars that have come in, which we're very fortunate as a city. They haven't been expended yet, but there's a significant amount of money that the mayor has allocated towards neighborhood development specifically. It will not be spent downtown. It will be spent in the neighborhood, because we realize that, as I said at the top of this, a city is the people that are in it, but as a center city for the region, we cannot neglect our business district either.
And with that in mind, I mean, I think it's often a stereotype, right, that one has to come at the sacrifice of the other. Do you buy that argument? Do you accept the idea that if downtown is being developed, that the neighborhoods are suffering, or vice versa?
The way you phrased it, I think that perception, I understand the perception, I understand why it exists. But let me start by talking about very high level. If a development deal comes in, it needs to be able to be financed. And the deal so I mentioned the people who took office space downtown, which they may have interfaced with us and the mayor or what have you, as they're looking for property. They would not be looking in the neighborhoods just because of what they're bringing to the city. And some of the developments that we do, it also depends on the funding source, right? Because different funders want to put their money into specific places. So there's an investment stream. So even if the city puts up money, which we have done in neighborhoods, some of the deals in the neighborhoods are very, very challenging. They have to be funded and they have to be sustainable. And that is one of the other, go ahead, you're going to ask a question.
Sorry, it was just, I imagine that as a city, we are a city as a whole, right? Neighborhoods, yep. Where I live in Frog Hollow versus Clay Arsenal versus downtown, yep. We are still one city, right? So even if there's development in Clay Arsenal, that's not necessarily going to mean that, Frog Hollow or my neighbors lose out. It still Correct. Benefits all of us, right? I mean, and I think, and that works downtown, that works Upper Albany, that works Blue Hills, that works, we all essentially can see the benefit of those development, of any development, right?
So I thank you very much. I agree with you 100%. I think it might not always be evident to people, but sometimes, there's that adage, well, you're developing downtown, but there is this need for an increased tax base, which will help all of the residents overall. Just like when I talk to people who don't live in Hartford, I try to explain to them that the more vibrant the city of Hartford is, the better the property values in the surrounding exurban communities will be as well, because there are jobs here in Hartford. As I said to someone once who was making a comment about Hartford, I said, yeah, every one of the people in this room works in downtown Hartford. So it's important that you support the downtown city as a regional economic driver that helps you have your livelihood. The same is true in the city of Hartford. As you said, one does not necessarily mean something negative for the other one.
And Randall, you touched on the ARPA funds. Maybe for those that don't know, which I think is most of us, if you could explain first quickly what that is.
Yes. So as a result of the COVID pandemic, the federal government has passed an act which provides a lot of direct funding, and it is called the American Rescue Plan, to help cities and states recover from the scourge, particularly the economic scourge of the pandemic. Those funds go to both the state, which the state can allocate funds, and then some cities also got direct funding. The city of Hartford is one of those major cities that received direct funding. Don't hold me exact on the numbers, but I believe that the Department of Education received approximately $126 million. The city of Hartford received approximately $88 million. We have not received all of that money yet, but we will receive it, and as well as a small state allocation. The expenditure of those funds has to be tied to COVID, so there are some restrictions in how they get spent.
Okay. And along those, I know there was also a recent announcement about plans to address the needs of some of the neighborhoods, specifically in the North End. Can you talk some about those initiatives?
Yes, and any one of my directors who has more information can feel free to jump, not my directors, but the directors I work with can jump in. Let me start by saying, as I mentioned before, there have been parts of the city where there has been tremendous disinvestment. The North End is one of those places that, where my parents grew up, where there's not been investment for 20, 30 years. So that is one focus where we are looking to develop some of the properties that the city owns there and to help increase the vibrancy in that neighborhood, increase jobs, increase access to food and other resources. But in addition to that, we are looking at other parts of the city as well. There's been a lot of investment in the Parkville neighborhood in the last 5 years by one of the local residents there. But the state has come in and helped in that investment, and there will be continued investment there. And we see that as the kind of one of the next areas that will be major growth. But as well as that, we are looking at other parts of the city as well to continue our investment.
And I see Mary's smiling face there, which I think means we have a question from one of our attendees. So Mary, if you would.
Yes, so we did have Tanaya is asking generally about combating gentrification, which I think you did touch on earlier. But if a citizen resident has some questions, especially in regards to the issues of gentrification in Hartford, who can they contact in Development Services?
Well, certainly they can contact myself or Charles. I will say that I think the discussion of gentrification is always a moderately fraught one, no matter what city you're in. Even when I lived in New York City, I lived in Harlem for 5 years, and there was a huge discussion about gentrification there. And obviously, gentrification generally occurs when more wealthy residents move into an area where there are low income or moderate income residents. And it is generally characterized when people are priced out of the market and can no longer live in the neighborhoods that they grew up in. That's basically what gentrification is. I do think in a city like Hartford, we have a large amount of affordable units. Most of our housing stock was built before 1940, I think 70%, some huge number. So although gentrification is something that could happen, I don't see it as the major factor today in terms of pricing anyone out of their homes. I will say right off the top, I understand that our downtown market is a different price point, but it is a city. It is it's not a major city like Boston or New York, but it's an important city, and it is also the capital city, and that happens everywhere in America. I do think I understand the concern when it comes to the neighborhoods. Again, I do think we're ways off from gentrification that will price people out. So I think it's an ongoing conversation to figure out how do we mitigate that and how do we provide opportunities for the residents that live here. Brian will touch on it later, so I won't go into too much detail, but we provide a lot of, we try to provide a lot of resources here to increase home ownership in the city to residents that live here already that are low and moderate income, but I'll let him talk about that when he comes up.
And in the last couple of minutes that we have, Randall, any other big ideas being discussed that might result in substantial neighborhood improvement that we haven't kind of touched on yet?
Well, we talked about the Parkville neighborhood, but again, coming back to the North End, we are looking to do substantial planning efforts, which Amy has been involved in, which help move forward development in that area. Up to and including new housing, new commercial development as well. And it is interesting, I will tell you something I didn't know that I learned yesterday from NPR. Unity Plaza, which is an area where I used to go all the time in the North End with my grandmother. I remember the round building that's a daycare used to be a bank when I was a kid. But apparently Unity Plaza was formed in 1968 directly after the riots as a result to a lack of services that have been provided to low income and quite frankly, brown and black residents who lived in the neighborhood. So I think the fact that we're focusing on that now is important and relevant from a historical context, as well as in the fact that we need to, again, shore up those resources and access to people who live in those neighborhoods.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all the work that you do. I'm sure not even, I understand that you work a lot and you put in a lot of hours and do you do a wonderful job at helping all of us in the city continue to work in moving Hartford forward. So we do appreciate your efforts and all you continue to do and keep it up, please, as we continue to move forward.
Thanks so much, Aaron.
So with that, it is time to move on to the Director of Planning, Miss Amy Chambers McKay. Ms. Chambers returns to her hometown, Hartford, Connecticut, to serve as a Director of Planning in April of 2019. Prior to that, she obtained a master's in urban planning at the University of Maryland. She's a certified urban planning professional and an experienced project manager with a foundation in case management. She has a love for people in the built environment, creativity, and for building equity through planning. Amy has demonstrated history of working in affordable housing development, grant management, and a background in foster care management. Amy's also skilled in nonprofit management, budgeting, construction management, and program development. Ms. Chambers has utilized her talents to begin the process of streamlining and systemizing the planning process within the city. In addition, her team provides support to Planning and Zoning Commission and regularly attends numerous NRC meetings. Moreover, she works closely with the Department of Public Works, the Mayor's Office, and the COO's Office to implement planning initiatives which may lead to brand new building construction, adaptive reuse of existing structures, zoning code revisions, streetscape design and construction, as well as slow road initiatives. Hello, Amy, how are you?
I am fantastic. How are you, Aaron?
I'm doing well, thanks. It's nice to see you. Although I feel like between planning and zoning and the NRZs, I feel like we see each other on Zooms on a pretty regular basis. This
Pretty much,
almost feels like normal.
Yeah, definitely.
So obviously, we heard some from Randall and kind of the overview of the department. You manage, are in control of one, I would say, pretty large aspect of that department, so planning and zoning. I don't think most people understand what planning and zoning is. So share with us, if you would, fill us in on what planning and zoning is.
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you for having me here today. I love talking about planning, so right up my alley. Planning and zoning are kind of two separate but related hats. Planning is, they're both, I would say, about the built environment, and certainly all of the work that my colleagues do within development services is about impacting the built environment. Planning in particular is the study of how people utilize space and how the usage of that space impacts their outcomes, whether that be health or access or economic opportunity, et cetera. And essentially, it's about how we design our built environment to optimize people's experiences in that space. I think I would add to that question of anti-gentrification efforts that, planning is also about making sure that folks with the least opportunity or access to things are able to be centered in those discussions. And that planning certainly has a social aspect to it that is important to kind of be mindful of. Just with regard to that question, I just wanted to add that I think that, planning is really integral to issues of gentrification because it's about looking forward and it's about being proactive rather than just reactive. Certainly once you're in the situation of addressing issues of affordability, it's too late. So you need to be, mindful and pay attention to kind of what's coming down the line. But at the same time, we have to remember that even, in any community where there are not economic opportunities, it's important to figure out how you strike a good balance between those two things, because you want to ensure that even the residents that are there now today have as much opportunity as possible. So how do you create programs that are able to both provide that opportunity to people, but as well mitigate future issues that may be related to it? Separately, but again related, zoning is actually like the law associated with planning activities. Zoning is specifically related to what we would call current planning, or sometimes you hear people refer to it as plan review, which we do in our division. These are basically decisions guided by our zoning regulations, which are a set of laws on the books that determine how we design an area. And we will take applications essentially from residents or developers when they have projects that they want to do on their property, or from the Department of Public Works, for example, when they have things that they want to redesign in a park or elsewhere. Our zoning applications can be anything from as small as a new use going into a building or someone wanting to put up a shed on their yard, to something as big as a development like the Downtown North project or Park and Main. We basically would review these applications for issues with impacts to wetlands, ensuring that we're not creating a completely paved environment, making sure that we're not taking down too many trees, because there are really important, functions that trees have in the city. In addition to our basic zoning, we also have guidelines for work in wetlands areas, for the development of subdivisions. So if you wanted to divide a lot a number of times, there are guidelines around that. Kind of in this bucket, in the function of the planning division at the City of Hartford, we also have our historic preservation work. I will note that in other municipalities, historic preservation by itself could be its own department. There's definitely a lot of work there, but the goal is to help to preserve our historic assets, our historic buildings, and the historic character of properties throughout the city as well. I mentioned the zoning regulations, and those were changed over in 2016. And Erin, you mentioned our commissions, and our commissions are the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Zoning Board of Appeals, who hears appeals on matters or requests for variances, which are when people have hardships on their property, and then our Historic Preservation Commission. We lost our slides. Should I keep going?
Yeah, you're good. And Amy, I think on a very basic level, zoning, right, is if you have a piece of property, the zoning laws, these zoning ordinances determine whether you could put a house on that, whether it can be an apartment or it has to be some type of retail or office. I mean, that's the very basic idea of zoning, right? Is a piece of property, the zoning laws determine what can be built or what can be used on that property, right?
Exactly. That's precise.
So if somebody wanted to open a new business in the city of Hartford, a good first step would be, what is that property zoned for? Is this business allowed on that property?
100%.
And that's something that you and your staff would review and potentially say yay or nay.
Yep.
Okay.
Definitely.
Excellent.
Yeah. So I was just going to add, on average, my team sees about, we have been over the course of 2021 seeing about 150 applications a month for zoning matters, and are working through to complete them on a regular basis. So in addition to that, I guess I'll just go on. In addition to that, I'm also responsible for Complete Streets, which is another initiative under the planning and zoning auspices. Complete Streets is essentially a policy that the City of Hartford and the Court of Common Council passed a few years ago, which is meant to focus on how we utilize our streets and how we prioritize usership on the streets. Obviously, cities have a long history of prioritizing single occupancy vehicles. The city, Hartford in particular, has had several decades of impact to the fact that the interstates, were constructed through the city, through the center of the city. And Complete Streets efforts are meant to work on a policy and implementation basis to counter that. So our Complete Streets policy is something that folks can access and look up, but essentially it is meant to prioritize pedestrians, prioritize bicyclists, and prioritize transit users over individuals in single occupancy vehicles, and do that by creating initiatives that will help to make the streets more inviting, sidewalks more inviting, and make the streets safer for those users. Some of the ways that we work on our Complete Streets here at the city are to develop new streetscapes, so to redesign the streetscape and to design it in ways that maybe help to create more safety for pedestrians. The Planning and Zoning Division in 2019 also passed a bicycle master plan, and that master plan is basically a plan that is meant to guide development for the creation of additional bike infrastructure to help build safety for bicyclists. And we had been doing on a monthly basis a Complete Streets meeting, which is open to residents. We have moved that to be bi-monthly instead. So our next meeting is December 13th. That meeting does happen during the day, and we know that we have a lot of residents who are unable to participate during the day. So we're also moving to doing the same report out at our planning and zoning meeting in the evening immediately following that meeting. So if you're not able to attend the Complete Streets meeting on December 13th, which is at noon, you can attend the planning and zoning meeting on December 14th at 6 p.m. To hear the same information. The only other thing I would add here is that we also want to make sure that we're doing a better job of communicating out the work that we're doing, both with regard to Complete Streets and our other initiatives. So we have, the Planning Division also manages our DDS Hartford Facebook page. We have a Safe Streets safestreets@hartford.gov email inbox, where if you have any questions or concerns, you can always reach out to us, as well as a @SafeStreets Instagram account, where we recently started posting things related to our Complete Streets efforts, which are related both to planning as well as to work that DPW is doing as well. And I can go on to the next slide. So we're also responsible for working on long-range planning. So once again, planning is about looking into the future and being able to both plan for additional economic opportunity in the future, as well as mitigate potential negative byproducts to large-scale development or other issues that are happening within the city itself. So a couple of the things that we have kind of both in implementation and planning phase now. The Planning and Zoning Commission is responsible for adopting a plan of conservation and development, which is the city's comprehensive plan. That is meant to be a high-level document that helps to kind of guide development over a 10-year period. That was adopted in May of 2020. We are also working on a planning project for the Arrowhead, which is the block where Salvin Shoes was formerly and the Flatiron Building is. And that plan stretches into the Clay Arsenal, further into the Clay Arsenal neighborhood. The goal of that planning effort is really to make sure that the development that's happening, whether in the downtown proper or in the area of the Downtown North project, is able to be blended effectively and able to serve the residents of Clay Arsenal and the North End as a whole. And so that we're not proliferating, additional disconnect between downtown and the North End. So there are conversations going on right now. We had a community meeting on Wednesday of this week. We did one in the afternoon outdoors and then one in the evening indoors. And I would encourage folks to take a look at the website that our consultants have also set up for that project. And I will drop that in the chat afterwards, but I can go on to the next slide.
And Amy, one of the things that I hear, questions as why Hartford 2035. I think it's important to note that that's Hartford's 400th birthday. That's when our city will be 400 years old.
Correct.
And you mentioned obviously some of the planning and your passion for planning, if you will. I understand that recently some consultants have been hired to assist on some of the planning for some of the neighborhoods specifically. Can you provide us with a short overview of that project and what that involves?
Definitely. So I will say that our NRZs have done some really amazing planning over the course of time, and the Planning Division has, access to all of those documents that have been produced. One of the things that's really important with regard to planning in general is that we're constantly evaluating and assessing our accomplishments, as well as where we can continue to grow. And so many of those plans are documents that are old. They're older than 10 years. And we want to work to build upon the work that has been done, build upon those documents as they've been written, and make sure that we have kind of more nuanced planning focusing on different neighborhoods, so that as we move into the future and as policy decisions are made, they're really guided by work that has been done in the community. And plans are the best way to do that. They are an opportunity for, residents and stakeholders to gather and to really have their voice be heard. And so we being myself, Marion Griffin through Hartford Next, as well as other individuals, have had some conversations about how we best do that moving forward. We want to make sure that these are documents that are adopted by the Planning and Zoning Commission and further adopted by council, so that they really do serve as formal guiding documents for the city. And so we did put out an RFP earlier this year for consultants to help us with that, and to help to do that by focusing on 4 neighborhoods at a time. We are going to be doing planning efforts with the Northeast neighborhood, the Upper Albany neighborhood, Frog Hollow, and Asylum Hill. And we've been just kind of working on trying to get through the contracting process. Sometimes getting through contracting can be a little bit difficult. So that has delayed us, but is still certainly a priority and something that we are really excited to get moving, and excited to just be able to further engage both with the NRZs themselves, as well as the larger resident groups in the various neighborhoods, in order to get those documents moving.
Excellent. That's exciting. On top of that, one thing that we didn't touch on yet, zoning enforcement. I understand you're also in charge of the zoning enforcement officers. So if there is an issue with what's allowed per zoning, our neighbors can call and ask for a zoning enforcement officer to come out and follow up on that. That's something that your office oversees as well. So definitely a lot on your plate, definitely keeping your staff busy, I'm sure, and you also. And,
yeah. And I would just add, if someone does have a concern related to zoning enforcement, that we utilize the 311 system. Anytime something comes to 311, it goes directly to our zoning enforcement officers. So if someone does have a concern, they can put it into 311 and we will get it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'll put in a plug for our previous discussion where we had Janice Castle, who was the director of, in part, in charge of the Hartford 311 system. So you can learn more about that too from our previous session, which is available online. Amy, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all that information. Obviously, planning and zoning is something that touches on how we all live in the city, probably in ways that few of us ever think about. And not just today, but how we live moving forward. So thank you and your staff for all your efforts. We greatly appreciate it. With that, the next person we're going to chat with today is Mr. Brian Matthews. Mr. Matthews is the Director of Housing here in the city of Hartford. He was appointed to that position in January of 2015. He oversees several federal, state, and locally funded housing programs and initiatives. With approximately $50 million under management, his charge is to create and maintain housing opportunities for residents of Hartford. He began his career with the city in May of 2005, and most recently he held the position of Senior Project Manager for a variety of federally and state-funded programs within the Division of Housing. Prior to joining the city, Mr. Matthews spent a decade in the mortgage banking industry, promoting homeownership in the towns of Hartford, Windsor, and Bloomfield. In addition to formally owning and operating a mortgage brokerage business, Mr. Matthews previously worked for Sikorsky Aircraft, a division of UTC, and People's United Bank, where he was instrumental in partnering with the city to create a successful down payment assistance program called House Hartford. The program is now responsible for creating over 1,500 new homeowners and providing $16 million in federal assistance since its inception. Brian has served as a board member for Rebuilding Together Hartford and the Urban League of Greater Hartford. He is an avid proponent of homeownership and has conducted seminars covering topics which include budgeting and credit, predatory lending and mortgage loan process, and small multifamily investment strategies. Mr. Matthews is a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania, where he was a member of the university's football and track and field teams. A native of Hartford, Brian has called several Hartford neighborhoods home, including the Blue Hills, South End, Asylum Hill, Southwest, and South Green neighborhoods. Brian, you've moved a lot.
I have. I have a personal interest in housing. It's at my core. And so in my private life, I like to purchase property, live there, perform work on my own, and either sell or hold. So not only am I the director of housing, but personally, I really embrace it.
Well, as a Frog Hollow resident, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that Frog Hollow wasn't on the list yet. So we'll be looking to see you in the neighborhood soon.
Sure, sure.
Welcome. How are you?
I'm well. I'm well. Thank you for having me, and welcome everyone that can attend today.
Well, and as I think, have touched on already, housing is obviously an incredibly important issue for any city, but especially in the city of Hartford. So your position, being the director of housing, is obviously an incredibly important position. So share with us more about you and your role and what it is that you do.
Well, I've been the director now for about 5 years, and I have 7 dedicated employees that work with me, and we try to make some magic happen for residents. We're humbled by the awesome responsibility that we have in helping to ensure that residents have a safe, sanitary, and affordable place to live in Hartford. Our division is federally funded, so we're able to bring about successful outcomes with no impact to the general fund. We work closely with developers, nonprofits, general contractors, lead consultants, home buyers, NRZs, and counseling agencies, and other private entities to bring about these successful outcomes in the housing space. I think before you can make real change in Hartford and address the issues, you have to know what those issues are. And many of us know what the issues are in the housing space in Hartford. We have low home ownership. We have some poor housing condition. We have some homelessness. We have housing cost burden for many of our residents. And historically, we've had lack of private investment. And so we try to create and gear our programs to efficiently attack those ills in our housing space. So we have programs, and I won't get into that just yet, but I want to get back to this gentrification idea because I think that's a subject that's on the mind of many people. Amy alluded to it. Randall alluded to it. There are a number of financing mechanisms to ensure affordability here in Hartford. Low-income tax credits, our federal home program, and our tax abatement program ensure affordability for 10, 15, sometimes 20 years. And so while I think it's a concern that many may have, the financing mechanisms that bring about new construction or rehab of existing rental stock ensure affordability. So I don't think we're there yet. It's not a big concern as far as I can see. In addition, and this was touched on, nearly 40% of our housing stock is restricted by deed or financing mechanism. And that is that folks under a certain income level are eligible to live there. So, and that number leads the state. We can have another discussion about regionalism and what other towns may or may not be doing in the area of affordable housing. But I'd like to get into some of the programs that we offer. There are several successful programs that touch all of housing. And so, sorry, and we'll start with our most successful. There's a typo there. It's called the Housing Preservation Loan Fund. So if you're a homeowner in Hartford, you're paying your taxes, you're paying your mortgage, you're doing all the right things, but you need a little bit of help with some repairs in the home, okay? You're paying your mortgage, you're paying for your kids in college, but you don't have money for that leaky roof or that furnace that is now on the blink, or your hot water heater goes. Or you have some blighted conditions and you want to correct those conditions. This program is here to help low to moderate income homeowners perform a variety of different repairs. Investors are also eligible. Where investors, if they want to engage in a beautification project, replace some windows, make the home better and more palatable for their tenants, they're eligible as well. Sustainable Solutions Program. That is another rehab program, but it's targeted specifically towards Hartford's Promise Zone. Some of you may know in 2015, Obama designated across the country certain areas as Promise Zones, those zones that have suffered historically from disinvestment. And so we thought it was a good idea to create a pot of money to go after those zones, to perform repairs for homeowners and investors where they were needed. The Home Partnerships Investment Program is our larger rental property program, where if there are 50 or 100 units, existing units that need substantial rehab, that program can help. That program also helps with new construction. Some of you may be aware of the Hub, 45 units of rental housing built by Mutual Housing. It's a beautiful structure on the corner of Park and Park Terrace. I invite anyone to drive by and see it. The design is great, and it's really going to serve chiefly low to moderate income individuals in our neighborhood. There are some market rate units, but by and large, there are units reserved for those that make under a certain amount of money. Our House Hartford program, we talked about that in the bio. So proud of this program. We remember what happened in the housing market in 2008, the crisis. It was easy to get into a home, but it was harder to keep it based on some of the lending practices that were happening at the time. Our House Hartford program provides up to $40,000 as a down payment. Often in this market, that's 20% down. And you may know that 20% down drives down the amount of money that you borrow from the bank. It eliminates private mortgage insurance. And it's a grant as long as the owner occupant lives in the property for a prescribed period of time. So if you're under a certain income limit and you want to call Hartford home, if there's a house out there, I think from a down payment perspective, there's no excuse. You can call Hartford home and you can do it in an accessible and affordable way where we provide assistance as a grant. We have a fair rent commission, and I invite anyone on the call who's interested in doing more in the city to look at the city's commissions and boards and see if you want to be a part of that. But we have a fair rent commission where folks get together and meet to protect the rights of tenants against unfair rent increases. We have a $45 million Section 8 program, and we use that Section 8 program in a number of different ways. It's rental assistance for low to moderate income individuals. And at current, we have 5,200 voucher holders. And these vouchers give you the ability to live in Hartford or outside of Hartford. These vouchers either cover all the rent based on your income, or it covers a portion of the rent based on those that make a little more. We've used project-based vouchers to incentivize development. And something I'm proud of we've done while we're here, we've allocated 10% of our allocation, our Section 8 vouchers, that's roughly $4 million, towards ending homelessness. And so folks who are experiencing homelessness now have a preference. They can be assessed by Journey Home. And if they qualify for a voucher, they'll get a voucher. So we're really proud of that commitment. I don't think any other city has committed that much to ending the scourge of homelessness as our program here in the city. We have a fair housing initiative to protect people from discrimination in the area of housing. We have a residential tax abatement program. We have a number of affordable projects around the city, rental units. But for this tax abatement, operationally, it would be a challenge to continue operations, just the costs involved. And so by paying less than, now the city forgoes some revenue, that's true. But we think the upside is now that owners can operate a building with 100 units, house folks that make a little less money in a safe and sanitary environment. So it's a trade-off, and we think that trade-off is well worth it. And finally, we have a GAP program. And I'll ask everyone to lobby your city council because right now this GAP program is unfunded. This is a program that checks all the boxes, including blight. Let's say that we have an empty lot. It's not creating any tax revenue. There's no home there. We can incentivize the developer to build a single or two-family home. So you're creating home ownership. You're putting the lot into purposeful use. You're collecting taxes. In some cases, when there is an existing property already there, we're remediating blight. And then you want to sell to a homeowner once the property is completed. And so what the GAP program does is, if it costs $300,000 to build a home, but you can only sell that home on the open market for $250,000, well, there's a gap. there's a gap there. The city of Hartford, in the form of assistance, provides that gap, incentivizes the construction of a 1 or 2 or rehab of a 1 or 2. And on completion, that home is now sold to an owner occupant. So that's another way that we increase the supply of home ownership housing. Right now, that program is unfunded. We're using state funds. We have run out. So I encourage everyone, if that sounds good to you, we're also using local minority contractors to construct these homes. So if that sounds good to you, please lobby who you can. I'd love to get active again with that program.
And Brian, I'm going to let Mary jump in and ask questions from the audience first.
Sure.
Yep. Thank you, Brian. So these are a lot of programs that you have, and we did put the link for the website. What's the best way for someone to contact your department if they have questions about some of these programs, but especially in cases where it's an emergency situation?
So email, that's always, I think, the best way given our workloads, but certainly we take in walk-in inquiries and clientele. Of course, you can call us here in the office. We have work cell phones. We're also going to do a better job in the future of creating or improving our social media presence so people can get information maybe on Facebook, a web page that we may have there. So I would say email first, but of course, walk-in clientele, and of course, where you can reach us by phone.
Great. And if you could, when we move on to the next person, if you could just put into the chat those email and phone numbers, we'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay.
And Brian, you touched a little more on that gap funding. You talked about the tax abatement programs. Maybe you could just share your thoughts, I guess, kind of briefly on why a city like Hartford, or why any city, but especially a city like Hartford that struggles so much with the amount of taxes we can collect because so much land is owned by the state or other public entities. What's the benefit to the city to offering tax abatements?
Right. Well, I think many people may know that, well, one, we're a multifamily city. 85% of our housing stock, our housing units, are in multifamily buildings. So that, coupled with limited acreage, that gives us very few development opportunities. We don't have a lot of space or room to grow outward, right? And so sometimes it's hard to add to the grand list because you have what you have and you have to do the best with what you have. That being said, we also recognize that there are a number of people that are housing cost burdened. They use 50% of their income towards housing, some even more. That's a problem. And so when we talk about properties, larger properties that serve low to moderate income individuals and families, everyone needs a safe, affordable place to live. But for some of these larger projects that house folks, where would they go? There'd be no housing option for them. So when owners approach us and say, hey, our operating costs are high right now, we can't afford to cover the costs of operations, everything we have to take care of that's associated with the property, and pay full taxes. And so what the tax abatement program does is we have them fill out an application, and we don't give away tax abatements. You have to, through a vetting process, demonstrate the need for a tax abatement based on the budget, based on the numbers. In exchange for a tax abatement agreement where you pay lower taxes and the money you're saving, now you can put into operations. Now you can put into resident programs. Now you can make that community and that building a better experience for all residents. In exchange for that, we insist that the building remain affordable for 15 years into the future.
There's also rent restrictions that come
yes,
along with that.
That's right, rent restrictions, right.
So it's another
So,
another tool the city helps utilize to help stabilize rents or to help maintain rents for its residents. In other words,
that's right. To Amy's point, what kind of programs, direct programs or ancillary effort can you use to kind of stabilize rent, stabilize neighborhoods, stabilize resident household situations. That's one way. That's one way of doing it. We also insist that folks that receive tax abatements improve their properties. Usually, we give them 3 to 5 years to invest in their properties. Maybe new furnaces and boilers, maybe remodeling of the units, and they usually have 3 to 5 years to do that. So we may be foregoing some rental, some revenue, but we're ensuring affordability and we are improving the quality of our existing housing stock.
in other words, it's a long-term investment for the city, if you will.
It is, and we think it's well worth it.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for explaining a lot of this. I'm sure that a lot of folks that are watching this were not aware of all the programs the city has. And I suspect that you'll have some folks reaching out to find out more information on these. I know there's some information available in the chat if people want to have access to the website where they can find more detailed information on some of these pretty awesome programs that are helping to provide more housing and affordable housing and quality housing for all of our neighbors here in the city. So thank you as well for your efforts and all that you do. And with that, we are going to next speak with Miss Judith Rothschild, who is a director of Blight and Remediation. I'm sorry, let me start again. She's the director of Blight Remediation and Housing Code Enforcement. Judith joined the Department of Development Services relatively recently, May of this year. Prior to joining the city of Hartford, she was the supervisory prosecutor for housing matters for the state of Connecticut, Division of Criminal Justice, Office of the CT Chief State's Attorney. Judith has over 35 years of experience in housing matters, which includes prosecution of violations of state and municipal housing, fire, building, health, blight, and related safety laws, as well as landlord-tenant criminal disputes. Attorney Rothschild is a CT police officer, standard and training council certified adjunct instructor, a CT Department of Administrative Services adjunct fire marshal and building official instructor, and was a practitioner in residence at the University of New Haven, Henry C. Lee College of Criminal Justice and Forensic Science. Judith has written instructional materials and conducted hundreds of trainings on the legal aspects of health and safety code enforcement and presents nationally on the administrative and enforcement of safety codes to prevent injuries and illnesses and to achieve health equity. Judith, now that we've finished your bio, I think we still have a couple minutes for you to talk. Obviously, that's very impressive. I'll ask you to unmute yourself and say hello to all. Thank you for being here. We do appreciate you taking the time.
Yes, good morning or good day to everyone. Whenever you're watching this, this video, I'm very happy to be here, Aaron, and thank you for the invitation and happy to be here with my colleagues today.
So as I understand it, the blight remediation position is a, I'll say, relatively new position in the city. I believe you're only the second official person to hold that title. So I'm sure a lot of folks still don't fully understand what all that involves or entails. So educate us if you would.
I'm happy to educate. I like to do that. So the Blight Remediation and Property Maintenance Program is part of the Department of Development Services. Its purpose is to have the city in a position where the properties that we have in this wonderful place are at their best level of existence. And I've been working in the state as a prosecutor up until May for 30 years. I have seen many of our municipalities, our larger cities in particular, struggle with similar issues. And there's a need for addressing those properties within each of our cities, and now I concentrate solely on the city of Hartford, to take the properties that we have and build them back into a safe and affordable condition, a condition that would not hamper the well-being of the residents in the area in and around those buildings. And that takes work. And the work that we give towards that, we dub work within the Blight Remediation and Property Maintenance Program. So it's involving a team of inspectors who are experienced, dedicated, and hardworking, that go around the city on their own, and also in response to 311 referrals to the Blight Remediation team, and will visit properties and will do what they can to work with property owners and occupants to make sure the properties are made rehabilitated, the blight is removed, and that it's done promptly and maintained that way. And if you live in a property that's not maintained well, it is further recognized through the Blight Remediation team, and also through the Housing Code Enforcement team, which is also under my division, that the outcomes of the lives of the people in and around those houses are directly affected by those conditions. So blight remediation is sort of maybe an overused word to mean that we are correcting the built environment so it's healthy, safe, and affordable as it exists out there today, rather than concentrating on new construction, which would be part of L&I, licensing and inspection. Part of DDS, we concentrate on what's already here.
And Judith, kind of the very basic level, what's blight? If someone says it's a blighted building or a blighted property, what does that mean?
Well, we have an ordinance which defines for us what would be constituting blight within the city of Hartford limits. Generally, it's buildings in a dilapidated condition, or properties outside, surrounding the building, the lot itself, if it has a building or not, which is containing debris or junk or materials or broken fences, things which would mostly from the exterior, but it also covers interior, are not up to the standard that they're required to be. And a lot of it you can see visually. And even someone without a lot of experience in construction or code enforcement could tell is an issue for a property. So it's structural, and is also ground-related violations of our blight ordinance, which would be citable by that blight team. So substandard conditions in general, Aaron.
So if any of our neighbors, had a house in their neighborhood that has a bunch of trash accumulated on it, that's something that would fall under your purview?
It would. Trash on it is around the property would be something that our blight team would respond to and would involve themselves with. And there's also other divisions in the city and other departments in the city that may be involved. So, we work hand in hand within DDS with the various divisions, with my fellow directors and others that are not here today that will be coming another day. We also work with the Department of Health and Human Services, which addresses lot issues, particularly rodent-related ones. We also work with the Department of Public Works, which would be involved with garbage and refuse issues. But ours is more particularly the structure and the area right around the structure. That's where we come in and generally handle that first.
So falling down porches, broken windows, would something like that? I mean, if we see broken windows or broken fencing, those types of things as well?
Yes, it would be, and it would be particularly on vacant or abandoned structures when it relates to the blight enforcement team. We do also deal with occupieds on blight enforcement, but there's also housing code enforcement. So blight is one piece of the responsive agency within the city, which is in the division that I presently, I direct now, happily. It is the interior conditions, including some of the structural conditions, may be cited also by our housing code enforcement team. And if it's truly a structural issue, there is a piece of the house that's dilapidated and failing, we would call in and refer that to our building enforcement side within DDS, part of licensing inspection, our certified building officials under the direction of our chief building official. Anything that needed to be inspected and ordered corrected under the state building code, which is enforced by our building side, would potentially be ordered by them. But our housing code enforcement team is out regularly inspecting occupied properties. Our blight and remediation team are generally more involved with vacant and abandoned properties and lots.
And so issues, you know, as we slide into the cold season here, obviously an issue that comes up on a regular basis is heating. So, you know, if tenant had an issue with not having heat, that would fall under your housing code enforcement area as opposed to, okay.
Yes, that would go to housing code enforcement, and no heats, we call them no heats. Actually, it's the local housing code, the municipal housing code, Article 2, Section 18 of our municipal code, which you can find online, does cover no heat and lots of other things. And those calls should come into housing code enforcement. The best place to lodge that complaint is 311. 311 would then log it in and get it into our internal system, direct it to our team for disbursement of an inspector. And if it's a no heat emergency, that can happen 24/7. And okay, they will respond and do what they can do to get that heat rectified for the occupants of that building in a timely manner. And if it can't be rectified, sometimes systems can't be rectified fast enough for health and safety. Our division also has the authority and obligation to order what's called a vacate of the unit until such time as it's safe for occupancy to continue.
So ultimately, those are things that would fall under your purview as opposed to, say, you know, Brian's purview and director of housing. And I think that's something that maybe folks get confused on. And ideally, I think to your point, you file a complaint through Hartford 311. It's then Ms. Castle's job as the director there to determine who that complaint should go to. But things like that will ultimately end up under your purview for rectification as opposed to under the director of housing.
Right, and it's a little bit tricky because Mr. Matthews, Brian's division is housing, and mine is housing code enforcement, and they sound very similar, and they are, and they're certainly related. But yes, housing code enforcement is where you want to file your complaints. 311 is trained, they know based on the nature of what the caller is telling them, which one you need to be referred to. But if it's code issues, it's housing code enforcement, yes.
And on the flip side of that, say someone, you know, wants to buy a blighted property or, you know, have a vacant blighted building, they want to rehab that. Do they come to Judith and say, Judith, how do I fund this? Or do they end up back then under Brian's purview? You know, Brian showed us a lot of the funding sources and programs. Would that be something that would be directed back to Brian?
It would probably be directed back to Brian. Our team would give some consultation, some guidance, and some referrals. And it could be to Brian. It could also be to the tax office for the city for consideration if they have significant tax deficits with the city. You know, we do what we can. If an owner approaches the blight remediation team, they will be received with cooperation from our side. That's really what we're looking for. If the property owner or even a new purchaser is taking over a property with significant blight problems, we want to see that rehabilitation done. And we will do what we can, and we do what we can to work with that owner to relay them into program money where it exists, into any city incentives where it exists, because ultimately we'd like to see that property rehabilitated, made safe. And if it's not producing any tax roll for the city, it's also better off for that purpose that it be rejuvenated so that it's active and producing income for the city roll again. But our main focus in our division, blight remediation and housing code enforcement, is health and safety. We want that property livable and safe, and the community around it to be the same. And so just clear, and there's lots of national studies and research on this that I'm familiar with. There is an absolute correlation between the well-being of people and the condition of their housing. There's a doctor out of BU, Dr. Megan Sendal, who's quoted as saying, housing is the best medicine. If you have a well-maintained house, you have a shot at a well-maintained and successful life. And without it, the opposite is clear. So we work hard at that.
With that in mind, what are some of the obstacles that the city faces when attempting to address a blighted property?
So I would say commonly we have a couple of them. One is that we have to be able to have good communication, contact with the responsible party for that property. Hartford residents are more available to be contacted, to be sought out, to have conversations with. Out of Hartford residents or excuse me, owners, particularly out of state owners, it's more difficult to get that contact and to maintain it. Although out of state owners are often represented by in-state managers, it's still more complicated than working with a local owner. So contact is one issue. We do a lot of research and investigation to find out the proper parties, and we are challenged by it still routinely. Secondly, I would say cooperation. Everybody doesn't cooperate with getting properties into compliance, and that's unfortunate because it does take a lot of staff time to go to a property over and over again and push enforcement on it, but that's what we'll do if we don't get cooperation, which is much preferred. We have education for these property owners on why it's necessary. We have the programs for them to assist them in making them compliant, but bottom line is we need cooperation, and we ask for that from residents, and in return, we do what we can to assist. If we don't get cooperation in a reasonable time frame, and speed is important. When you talk about blight and garbage outside and unsafe structures, speed of response in our enforcement is important. People are potentially at risk, and the nuisances that are out there are sometimes dangerous over time can become more dangerous. If we don't get a reasonable compliance, then within our code, there is an enforcement provision which allows for the imposition of formal notices of violation, and if not corrected, citations to the responsible party, which would amount to a daily penalty incurred against the property owner for not complying. I can enforce all day long. That's my background. Our team knows how to do that. Frankly, we would rather not. We would rather property owners and responsible others simply understand the importance of keeping these properties safe and clean and repairing when it's timely needed, and we'll work back with you. We'll do what we have to do to keep the city clean outside of that, but that is certainly the preference.
And in the last few minutes that we have to chat here, over the last 4 or 5 years, as far as you know, I mean, has there been a change in the number of blighted properties in the city? Do we have more than what we started with? Do we have less? I mean, is it the same? Have we seen a change in that inventory?
I believe so. I have, as you mentioned, I'm the newbie here. I joined about 6 months ago to the city staff here and development services, and I believe the numbers are down. And I would suggest that that is a direct result of the efforts of the various divisions of the city, not just the blight remediation team, but it is down. We've done, through the blight remediation team, a lot of work. You can see on the screen the number of complaints, we just went off that screen, but the number of complaints, thank you, that have been responded to by the housing code team. This year alone, we're at over 1,000 since July 1, and I'm not quite sure when these numbers were run. They were run within the last couple of weeks. The whole last year, taking into account COVID and all, the housing code enforcement team did respond to a number of complaints. We did inspections close to 3,000 last year, and already this year we're over 1,600 housing code inspections, and that's with a team of only, we've got 7 housing code inspectors for the entire city, and so that's quite a big number, I think. On the blight side, similarly, all last year, 970 blight inspections. That's a team of 4. And in this year, so far only, we're already at 686 as of this numerical run. And so that's a lot of work that's being done. The result of that, if you go to the next screen, please, as an example, is that properties that are out in our neighborhoods here are changed, and it can take a big improvement to that particular neighborhood. Clearly, even just one dilapidated house or one vacant structure in a block can have an impact. And one of the impacts it can have is it can disincentivize neighboring properties from keeping their property in a good condition.
I think I've often heard blighted properties described as a cancer on a neighborhood, and if you don't catch it early, it can truly grow and spread. And perhaps as Mary flips through the last some of these examples, I can just say thank you again for the efforts and welcome to the city. I know you're not brand new here, but we're definitely appreciative of having you and your skill set. And look forward to utilizing that to continue to improve the neighborhoods that we reside in and enjoy on a daily basis. All of these subjects are obviously very important topics. All of them are very integral in the progress that our city continues to make. And frankly, I think I could talk with each of you for another hour or 2 and probably still find and learn more information. But to with the idea of somewhat brevity, I do want to say thank you again to all of you that have been here and who've taken the time on this day to share your information with us and to help us better understand how our city government works and how we can better connect with our city government. Obviously, communication is huge through all of this, because if we can't identify problems to you, it makes it a lot harder for all of you to help us resolve those issues. So we appreciate you being here today and showing us who you are and how we can reach out to everybody. With that, I also wanted to say thank you quickly to Marion and Marion and Mary and Hartford Next and all the efforts that they do to help collectively raise our voices as residents of this city. And to make sure that we stay on time, I will turn it back over to Marion.
Well, thank you, Aaron. And I thank you, Randall, Brian, Judith, and Amy. As Aaron was alluding to, I was thinking that we could have a 2-hour session with each of you, because there is so much that we have yet to, what they say is unpack and discover and learn. So again, I want to thank you all for sharing with us today. And Mary, can you show our next slides?
Sorry.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so this has been a great adventure for us to be able to provide this to our residents. As you know, this will, if you don't know, we are going to be publishing this, so this will get some traction. So if those who were not able to participate today will be able to hear your message. We hope to have this up on a YouTube channel, on HPA-TV and other places for sharing. And secondly, we want everyone who is participating to complete a survey, which will be available to you. You will actually get a copy of the presentation. So your survey will help us to improve our webinars and to also give us topics for future programs. This program is being recorded. As I said, this will be made available on other sites. And as I get, again, you will receive the slides. So NRZs, if you are not a member of your NRZ or you don't know where your NRZ is, visit www.hartfordnext.org, find your NRZ. and you will be able to locate your NRZ. You'll be able to find out when they meet and who to contact. This is a great way to be involved in your neighborhood and to have a collective voice, because many voices together make a better difference than having one standalone. Secondly, what I'd like to do is thank everyone, and particularly the Hartford Foundation, for supporting this and funding this endeavor for us. And I'd also like to thank those who helped put this together, our panelists, Randall Davis, Amy Chambers, Brian Matthews, and Judith Rothschild. Also our interpreters today, Alba and Miguel, who are from Interpreters and Translators, Inc. in Glastonbury, Connecticut. And most importantly, our moderators and co-host Aaron Gill and Mary Falvey. So I cannot neglect our program committee, which consists of Jack Antonich, Janice Castle, and Emily Lugo. And we have more work to do. As Aaron had indicated earlier, we will continue these programs in February and March. And so we thank you all for your support, for your engagement, and for participating with us. Please spread the word, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your day.